Setsu was an ugly Isekai hero who was betrayed by his best friend and sent back to Earth. However, when he finally makes his way back, he forms a party of powerful baddies to clap the life out of his betrayers. It all began 10 years ago when Setsu and Toma were summoned to the kingdom of Dystania. Immediately, the king declared that they were the divine saviors of their land. As those present in the throne room began cheering and calling them heroes, Setsu wondered if they had gotten hold of some premium pot that morning. He said they had to be very delusional if they believed they would agree to become their heroes, after forcibly removing them from their daily lives before the release of GTA 6. Intrigued by the defiant youth, the king asked Setsu what his name was, and Setsu told him while staring him down. Days later, Toma watched Setsu train and asked how he remained so calm after being dropped into a messed up world like that one. Setsu answered that it was because he needed a cool head to survive. He reminded Toma that they would face off against monsters and demons, and said that if they wanted to survive, they needed to get stronger. Toma admitted he was scared of fighting, but Setsu managed to convince him to ditch that mindset and told him they needed to stick together, as that was their best chance to stay alive. After training, Setsu suddenly told Toma that he wanted to end the war, but Toma said it was impossible, and reminded Setsu that, compared to him, he was a pathetic under 3 feet midget weakling. Setsu told him to hold his head high and promised that he would protect him because they were all each other had. This managed to lift Toma's spirits, so he agreed, and they formed a pact of friendship. However, one day, Setsu suddenly packed up his things and told Toma that he was leaving to explore the world and clap bunny girls and elves if possible. Since Toma was still a scaredy cat, he didn't ask Setsu to take him along with him. Instead, he promised that he would do his best to become stronger, so he could stand beside him and finally end the war like they wanted to. Following this, the two made a promise to reunite when they had become real heroes, and then Setsu left with his friends, Elka, Glein, and Thea. Years later, Toma was given the title of Silver Hero by the king for his valor and accomplishments in battle. After the ceremony ended, Toma's subordinates began singing his praises, saying that in no time he would be able to lead the entire nation. Toma told them to stop with the glazing, and then looked up at the falling snow as he told himself that he was on his way to fulfilling their promise. Shortly after this, Toma led a raid on a temple, and, after claiming victory for Dystania, he prepared to leave, but a bright light from the altar caught his attention. He then heard a voice saying that weak and pitiful people didn't deserve to exist in that world. Toma tried to ignore it, so it told him that it could see into his heart and knew what his true desires were, which made him turn around. Since it now had his attention, the voice promised to grant all his desires and give him all the power he needed. At that point, Toma was already entranced, so he reached out and took the necklace that the statue on the altar was holding. The next thing he knew, he woke up outside with his sword in hand and the bodies of his men scattered around him. Toma was momentarily struck with guilt, but that feeling vanished as he told himself that he needed to keep going. He kept walking until another soldier came to bring him news about the peace treaty being signed between both sides. Just then, a carriage drove past them, and when Toma looked inside it, he was shocked to see Setsu and his friends laughing with Regulus and Desastol. As he tried to figure out why Setsu was there, Setsu turned and glanced at him momentarily. The next day, the peace treaty was signed by the 3 rulers, and during the ceremony, Toma couldn't help but notice how close Setsu was to everyone. Aside from that, Setsu was repeatedly hailed as the hero by everyone present, and all Toma could do was watch. That night, while the celebrations were ongoing, Toma found Setsu standing outside on the castle walls and went to talk to him. He commended Setsu for single-handedly ending the war, but Setsu said he'd gotten some help along the way. He then told Toma that he was equally impressed because he had heard of Toma's achievements, and Toma admitted that he only pulled through because of their promise. However, before he could say more, Elka, Thea, and Glein called out to Setsu from below, asking him to join them. Setsu said he was on his way, but before he could leave, Toma stopped him and said that they had to return home now that the war was over. He revealed that he'd found a way back, but Setsu told him he wasn't ready to return because he still had so much of the world to see. This shocked Toma, and as he began spiraling, the voice took over and corrupted him completely. The next moment, he told Setsu that he would destroy everything that came between them. Before Setsu could point out that he was sounding like a toxic boyfriend, Toma attacked him, so he moved to defend himself. As they fought, Toma laughed crazily, and Setsu struggled to understand what had come over him. Eventually, things got heated, and an explosion occurred, but by the time Elka and the others arrived to see what had gone wrong, they found that both guys had disappeared. While the explosion had sent Setsu back to his world, it sent Toma back to the temple. However, he was very weak, and was on the verge of giving up when his magic gem started glowing. It showed him a laboratory where some people were being used for experiments, so he decided he would save them because he felt a sort of connection to them. He easily located the facility, and after freeing all the people, he asked them to join forces with him to destroy the world, and they agreed. 5 years later, a younger-looking Setsu was at school getting bugged by his childhood friend Yuhi when suddenly the world outside turned pitch black, and a magic circle appeared in the middle of the classroom. The next moment, the entire class was transported to an open field, and while the other students wondered what in the Isekai trope was happening, Setsu beamed with excitement. Just then, some armored demons showed up, and when it became evident that they were looking for smoke, all the students started running. Setsu remained where he was, prompting Yuhi to try and shield him with her body when she realized he was about to become a whack-a-mole prop. However, it was pointless because Setsu used a finger to stop the weapon. Following this, he grabbed Yuhi's hand, and as they started running towards the direction the others had gone, an army of soldiers came charging out of nowhere and began fighting the demons. While hiding with the other students, Setsu was suddenly hit by the overwhelming dark aura coming from the demons, and that was when he realized that a curse was controlling them. Just then, Elka pulled up beside them, but she didn't recognize him, and as she was telling them to find a safer place to hide, Glean rode up beside her and ordered the rest of the soldiers to rage. After the battle, the students were brought before the king of the Kingdom of Dystinia, who welcomed them as heroes. The princess then added that they weren't the first to be summoned, as another hero had come to them 5 years ago and helped them end the First War. She said she could understand their confusion about the situation, but pleaded with them to help save their kingdom, just as the former hero had done. The students were hesitant to agree, but seeing as they had nowhere else to go or even a way back home, they agreed to become the new Avengers. The next day, the students' training arc began, and Yuhi discovered that she was among those who had an affinity for magic. Setsu didn't join the training session, so as he was walking around, he ran into Elka and got into an argument with her. When she ordered him to return to the training ground, Setsu challenged her to try and force him, so Elka pulled out her training sword and charged at him. He sidestepped her and smacked her peaches, shocking her into finally remembering him, so she went on her knees and welcomed him back. Setsu told her to stop embarrassing herself and get up, but she refused and convinced him to use her as a chair. Glean happened to walk by at that moment, so he questioned what was going on, and Elka happily told him that the guy sitting on her was Setsu. Glean was shocked, but he believed her because Setsu was the only person who could make Elka shamelessly act like the cultured masochist that she was. Following this, the duo rushed to inform Thea that Setsu was back, but to their surprise, Thea already knew, as she'd sensed Setsu's magic the moment he returned. Their reunion came with many questions, so they went to the top of the castle walls to discuss. There, they asked Setsu why he'd disappeared after his battle with their other friend, Toma. Setsu admitted he didn't know what happened, because one moment he was engaged in mortal combat with Toma, and the next, he was reborn on Earth with his memories and powers intact. He then asked about Toma, saying that he suspected that Toma was involved with the war because the demons were being controlled by a curse, and Toma was the only one who could do something like that. Thea revealed that Toma had also gone missing on that night, and said all efforts to find him had failed. As they began speculating whether or not he was still alive, a soldier came to inform them that Glein's presence was needed by the king. Later in the throne room, the king announced to Glein and his other top generals that he was declaring an all-out war on the demons. Glein objected to this decision, but the princess argued that the demons had broken the treaty by attacking first. She claimed the arrival of the students meant that the plot gods were giving them their blessings to fight back. Her father then said that they never should have listened to the first hero, and made peace with the demons. That night, Glein, Elka, and Thea found Setsu outside on the castle wall, and Glein informed him about the king's decision. He said he'd managed to delay the invasion by convincing the king that the new heroes needed more time to train, but that didn't mean that the war wouldn't happen. Setsu then declared that he was going to head out and stop the war before it fully began, shocking his friends. They tried to convince him to take them along, but Setsu said he needed them to stay back and protect the kingdom. The following day, they snuck into the castle to retrieve Setsu's sword by using Thea's magic to hide themselves. Elka knocked out the guard stationed in front of the storeroom where the sword was kept, and Glein stuffed him in a crate before they unlocked the door and went in. While they were there, the unconscious guard was discovered, causing the soldiers to lock down the castle because they assumed intruders had snuck in. When Setsu and the others heard the commotion happening outside, Glein and Thea offered to create a distraction and instructed Elka to ensure that Setsu got out. Elka didn't like this, and when she started complaining about being reduced to a bodyguard, Setsu pulled her away. After they made it out, Yuhi suddenly came out of nowhere and ran to meet them, asking Setsu where he was going. Setsu had no choice but to reveal that it was his second time being summoned to that world, and said he was going to link up with an old friend of his, so he could end the war. Yuhi begged him to take her along, promising that she wouldn't be a Sakura. But Setsu refused, saying he didn't need extra baggage, so she stopped insisting and trimmed off his hair using her magic. This parting gift earned her compliments from Setsu, after which he bid the girls farewell and set off on his journey to be the hero again. Years ago, in another part of the kingdom, a young girl named Ruri approached her grandfather, who was arguing with a customer over selling a brooch to him. This customer was the old Setsu, and the old geezer didn't want to sell the piece of jewelry to him. He told Ruri that Setsu was being a nuisance, but Setsu denied it and dropped a bag of gold coins on the counter. Immediately, the greedy old man declared loudly like an auctioneer that the brooch was sold. After Setsu left, Ruri curiously asked her grandfather why he'd sold the brooch at such a high price when he always claimed that pride was everything to a craftsman. The man explained that pride and attention to detail would always be important to a craftsman. However, it didn't pay the bills. Fast forward a few years to the present, the old man croaked, and after burying him, Ruri set off on a journey to deliver his last custom order to a client. While she was driving her wagon in the middle of the night, a terrifying growl spooked her horse, stopping it in its tracks. Ruri tried to coax the animal into moving, but it had already tapped out and wasn't listening to her command. The next moment, she spotted a wild boar which ran headfirst into her wagon, causing it to overturn. When Ruri hit the floor, the box containing the brooch she was going to deliver flew out from her backpack, so she rushed to pick it up. Her relief at finding the item intact momentarily distracted her from the fact that Sir Pigerton was still looking for smoke. When she finally turned around, she came face to face with the animal and became scared. However, instead of running for the hills, she attempted to talk no jutsu her way out of getting eaten and failed. Just as the overstuffed bacon was about to devour her, Setsu showed up out of nowhere and knocked it out. He then went to help her up, but Ruri took her time to observe him and was reminded of Setsu from the past. Her staring prompted Setsu to ask if he looked like her celebrity crush, and she assured him that he didn't. Once she was back on her feet, he turned to leave, but Ruri called out to him, asking him to be her bodyguard. Setsu refused, saying he wasn't a muscle for hire, but she pleaded with him until he caved and agreed to stick with her to the nearest town. Hours later, they arrived at a port city and went looking for the ship Ruri had hired to take her to the demonic continent. But to her utmost surprise, the captain said he wasn't going there. He explained that with the ongoing war, nobody was willing to take a risk, so all voyages to the demonic continent had been cancelled for the foreseeable future. Despite hearing this, Ruri was still determined to deliver her package, so she went around asking every ship captain if they would take her to her destination, and they all said no. Tired of watching from the sidelines, Setsu got up from where he'd been sitting to go to her, but stopped in his tracks when he noticed some knights had stopped Ruri. They told Ruri they were conducting inspections and demanded that she show them her identification document. After checking it, they asked to check her bag, but Ruri refused, so they decided to take it by force. Just as one of them was about to do so, Setsu slapped his hand away and asked if any of them had a permit to search her. The guards replied to his question with a question, wanting to know who he was, and Setsu said he was her guard. This prompted them to question why a mere adventurer was interfering with their business. They tried to intimidate him by placing their hands on their swords, so Setsu did the same and told them to draw them if they dared. Of course, they didn't have the balls, and when a crowd of people who condemned their actions started to gather behind them, the leader ordered the others to stand down. However, before leaving, one of them told Setsu to watch his back, as if he could do anything to harm him. With that settled, Ruri jumped on Setsu, tearfully thanking him for helping her out of yet another sticky situation. Later on, while they were refueling on some food, Setsu asked Ruri what she planned to do. She told him that she'd keep looking for a ship to take her, but if she couldn't find one, she'd buy herself a ship and take herself there. Setsu pointed out that she was being delusional because broke was too light a word to describe her current situation. Hearing this made Ruri more depressed than she already was. So Setsu felt bad and offered to take her with him since he was also going to the demonic continent. Later that night, at an inn, Ruri entrusted the brooch to Setsu because she was going to take a bath, and when he saw it, he recognized it instantly. She told him that her grandfather had agreed to repair the brooch for a special client even though he was very sick. After completing the repairs, he entrusted it to her, which was why she was going to such lengths to deliver it. Finished with her recap, Ruri left to go to the bathroom, but jokingly returned to tell Setsu not to rob her. Once she finally left, Setsu touched the brooch and it glowed, confirming to him that it was the same one he'd enchanted years ago. Later that same night, while Ruri and Setsu slept, the three knights came to the inn to settle the score with Setsu. However, he sensed their presence, so he sat waiting for them. When they entered the room, he apologized to the terrified Ruri for pushing up their departure time and jumped out of the window with her. The knights then began chasing them and didn't stop until they cornered them by the sea. However, Setsu surprised them by picking Ruri up and leaping off the edge of the wall. At that moment, the shocked Ruri was sure she'd meet her maker soon, but her shock turned to surprise when a sea dragon emerged from the water and Setsu landed on it. He called the dragon Levia and apologized for requesting a rideshare so late at night, but said he needed to get to the demonic continent ASAP. Levia acknowledged his request by letting out a loud cry, and as they moved along the water, it suddenly dawned on Ruri that they were currently riding Leviathan, the god of the sea. Hours later, they arrived in the demonic continent, and for some reason, Levia had a kaiju showdown with a giant squid, while an excited Setsu and worried Ruri spectated. When the battle was over, Levia took her human form and formally introduced herself to Ruri before turning her attention to Setsu. She angrily told him that his audacity had to be fresh from the farm because that was the only explanation as to why he called her up after ghosting her for 5 years, so he could use her as a mode of transportation. Setsu tried to defend himself, but Ruri cut him off to ask what they would do to the body of the dead squid, and Levia answered that Setsu would handle it. True to her words, Setsu handled it by making deep-fried squid rings, and as they ate it, Levia pointed to the mountains, saying the Demon Lord's castle was up there. Setsu told Ruri that he'd accompany her there because he also had business with Dizastal, the recipient of her package. When Levia mentioned that Dizastal was the Demon Lord, Ruri became as white as a ghost, but none of her companions seemed to worry. Levia then got up to leave, but Setsu didn't like this, as he'd hoped she would join him to visit Dizastal. Hearing this, Levia pointed her fork at him and cursed him out for trying to get her to stick around when he was hanging out with another woman and was about to visit another. Setsu tried to justify being an inconsiderate a-hole, but before he could do that, a demon kid tugged on his shirt. She was with two others and was curious to know if he and Levia were having a lover's quarrel. One of her friends advised him to apologize, as it was a man's job to do so. But the third one said Setsu looked way too stupid to understand a woman's feelings. Not wanting to be called out further by the pipsqueaks, Setsu stuffed their mouths with the squid rings, effectively shutting them up. The kids enjoyed the snack so much that they pleaded with Setsu to make some more for their parents. To Setsu's horror, Levia assured them that he would do it because they had plenty of squid left, so they happily helped them wheel the squid to their village. Moments before they arrived, the adult villagers were in a meeting where they lamented their inability to fish for food because of the giant squid. In addition to that, the human merchants had stopped coming, so once they ran out of their stored food, the entire village would starve. Unable to stand it anymore, one of the villagers proposed that they all band together to go and fight the squid, but the next moment, Setsu showed up, asking where he could leave the squid. Everyone was surprised to see that their mighty foe had come to them as food, so to show their appreciation to Levia for slaying it, they threw a party and fed her all the good stuff they had. Setsu was retained as the unwilling chef, but he ensured that he didn't put his mentor, Sanji, to shame by cooking up a storm of squid rings and wowing his audience. At that time, Vlad, the head of Desistol's personal guards, stood atop a hill, and when he saw the lights in the village, he assumed they were under attack by humans and rushed to save them. Back in the village, Levia approached Ruri, and after the two sat down to have a little chat, Ruri asked for the lore behind her friendship with Setsu. Levia lied and said that they had met during the First War when Setsu was attempting to cross the ocean without her permission, so she fought him. And when he won, Setsu demanded that she help him end the war. The real truth was that she had become annoyed by all the noise caused by the war, and went on a rampage. So Setsu came and reset her with a punch. Ruri enjoyed the story, and when she said something about how they met Desistol, Levia asked if the story of Setsu, the hero, wasn't well known in Distinia. Hearing this, Ruri realized that she'd reduced the almighty hero to an underpaid bodyguard and started freaking out. Levia told her to take a chill pill and said it wasn't her fault that she didn't know who he was, as Setsu was usually modest. She then turned to watch Setsu work, and Ruri concluded that Levia was secretly in love with Setsu, but she denied it. Just then, Vlad burst through the stage wall and loudly declared that he was going to save everyone, but was shocked when he saw that they were in the middle of a party. A little while later, the party was over, so Vlad approached Levia and apologized for crashing their party. When Setsu joined them, he questioned why Vlad was out so late, and the demon explained that he had come looking for Levia. However, now that he'd seen Setsu with her, he wanted both of them to return with him to save the demon lord. For context, he explained that Desistol was set to marry a scheming human named Terran, who wanted to control her using a subjugation curse. Setsu pointed out that Desistol was too strong to be affected by a curse, but Vlad explained that this wasn't the type she could resist. He then shocked Setsu by saying that the war had started up again a month ago when the humans invaded the demon continent. After the first attack, Terran showed up out of nowhere and proposed a way to end the war. He was basically the Elon Musk of their world, and also the head of the world's leading trading company, and since both races required his services to wage the war, he believed he could broker a peace deal between them. This made Setsu realize that Desistol was willing to sacrifice herself to stop the war, and he became pissed thinking that Vlad and his people weren't doing anything to stop her. Vlad argued that it wasn't so, but before he could properly defend them, Levia spoke up, cutting him off. She said that Desistol was only doing that because she was trying to keep the promise she made to Setsu to maintain peace, so they had to step in and save her from herself. Following this, she and Setsu ran towards the castle, and after fighting and slaying all the monsters they encountered, Levia asked Setsu what their game plan was. Setsu said the only plan was to stop the wedding and beat Terran to a pulp because he was sure the guy had a hand in the war. He didn't think it was a coincidence that while both sides were blaming the other for breaking the treaty, Terran showed up with a cursed necklace trying to sell peace. Levia asked if that made Terran the mastermind, and Setsu said no, he believed the real mastermind was also controlling Terran, and if they got Terran to snitch, they would find out who it was. Just then, more monsters showed up, so they stopped talking with their mouths and switched to their fists. Meanwhile, Desistol was taking a trip down memory lane, and she recalled how she'd fought and lost against Setsu, who, instead of vanquishing her, offered her his friendship along with a brooch. However, she later learned from Vlad that Setsu was missing and no one could find him. She was saddened by the news, but told Vlad that they had to do their best to ensure that the peace treaty was upheld, and he promised to give it his all. Fast forward 5 years to the month before Setsu was summoned, as Desistol and Vlad took a walk around the demon capital. Her brooch suddenly broke, so Vlad offered to take it to a skilled jeweler in Distinia to get it fixed. Days later, the peace in the kingdom came to an end as Desistol was informed that the Distinia army was attacking them. Vlad's immediate reaction was to question how frail the peace treaty was, but Desistol told him not to jump to conclusions, and ordered 2 of her generals to head to Distinia to find out the truth. A month later, the war was still going on, and Desistol was getting more worried, as her emissaries had yet to send word back. Just as she began questioning whether she could keep her promise to Setsu, Vlad came to inform her that Terran wished to speak with her. Desistol agreed to meet with him, and after they sat down to talk, he told her that he wished to use his influence to end the war. So Desistol asked what he wanted in return. Terran answered that he wanted her to be his wife and presented her with the cursed necklace, saying they would swear their love on it. As soon as Vlad and the other generals saw it, they immediately recognized it and implored Desistol to kick the idiot man out. Ignoring them, Desistol asked Terran to give her time to think about his proposal, and Terran agreed, but warned that time wasn't on her side. Sometime after he left, Vlad went to speak with Desistol in her office and asked her to reject Terran's offer, but she refused, saying it was the only way to end the war. Seeing her determination, Vlad promised that he wouldn't give up just yet, and then left the room. That night, as Terran's carriage moved along the city, he conversed with a cloaked man who was in on his scheme to take control of the demon continent. Terran was pleased that they had been able to use his trading company to carry out their schemes, but said it was time they ended the war since he knew Desistol would accept his proposal. His companion wasn't on board with the idea of pulling out their magic troops, and when Terran questioned why, he said it was the will of his master. Days later, it was the wedding day, and the guests were a mixture of humans and demons. Terran's companion was also there, and he seemed all too pleased with everything that was about to take place. Desistol soon came in, and after she took her spot on the altar, facing Terran, the ceremony began. When the minister asked them to exchange their vows of love, Terran pulled out the cursed necklace and held it up for everyone to see. He then announced that he and Desistol were entering a vow of master and servant, and vowed to bring peace to the world, using his trading company, which would now be backed by the Demon Kingdom. He then told Desistol to make a vow of eternal love to him, and as he moved to place the necklace on her, Desistol began wishing that she could see Setsu one more time. As if on cue, the man of the hour burst through the window above the altar. When he landed on the altar, he told Desistol that he'd come to rescue her from a fate worse than death. Terran, who had fallen to the floor in shock, demanded to know who Setsu was and why he was crashing his wedding, but Setsu only glared at him. Terrified, he ordered his guards to protect him, but when they moved to attack, Livia showed up and shot them down using water magic. Desistol was surprised to see the god, but Livia wasn't about to miss a chance to tease the demon lord and told her that white wasn't her color. She then turned to face Terran, but the coward ran off, leaving his companion to square off against Livia on his behalf. He attacked her using shadow magic, so she jumped into the air to avoid it, only to be caught midair. The guy then told her to go back to the water where she belonged and unleashed another round of shadow magic on her. But Setsu saved her. The next moment, he appeared behind the guy and punched him across the chapel to where Terran was hiding. When Setsu approached him, the guy expressed surprise at seeing him, but said he knew his master would be pleased to know he was back, and tried stabbing Setsu with his shadows. Setsu defended himself, so the guy jumped in the air and started shooting his shadow arrows from there, but Setsu blocked them, after which he appeared behind the guy again and kicked him into a nearby pillar. When he approached him, he asked why he wasn't fighting back, and the guy explained they would settle their score later because he had to go report to his master first. The next moment, before Setsu could react, he broke the wall and escaped. As Setsu lamented his failure to capture the guy, Desistol suddenly jumped on him and excitedly told him that she'd missed him. When he hugged her back, Livia interrupted them to point to the unconscious guards, who vanished when Setsu touched them, and Desistol said they were magic soldiers made from curses. Just then, Setsu spotted the cursed necklace, so he picked it up and said he was now certain that Toma was involved behind the scenes. After he destroyed the cursed item, Desistol claimed that she'd also suspected Toma was involved, and asked Setsu to let her help. Setsu agreed to an alliance and said he'd let her wrap things up in her kingdom, while he went to visit the Beast Nation. He wanted to speak with Regulus, the Beastmen king, because he knew that whatever Toma was up to would require all the help they could get. When Livia began complaining about being used as a boat again, Ruri and Vlad arrived, and the demon general complained when he saw the state of the chapel. Ruri rushed to Setsu and gave him the package, saying she thought he should be the one giving it to Desistol. Agreeing with her, Setsu took the brooch and placed it where it belonged on Desistol's neck. Later on, while the demons cleaned up and took Terran into custody, Setsu and Livia bid farewell to Desistol, Vlad, and Ruri, who had decided to stay there after Desistol rewarded her with a shop for delivering her brooch. Meanwhile, back in Destinia, the heroes' training continued, and Yuhi was proving to be the most talented one out of all of them. Elka was impressed by her performance, and like any good teacher, she praised her and told her all the right words to boost her confidence and morale. When training concluded later on, Yuhi followed Elka and Glein so she could speak with the former and ask her to give her special training. Elka was surprised, but she agreed and met Yuhi on the castle walls that night to begin her first lesson. However, before diving into it, Elka admired the view and told Yuhi that Setsu was the one who made their world a peaceful place. She said his leaving was to ensure that the peace was protected, and as his companions, it was expected of them to be fully prepared in case they had to go help him out. Yuhi admitted that she lacked the strength required to stand beside Setsu, but said she was determined to do whatever it took to gain it. She then pointed her staff at Elka as a way of challenging her, so Elka acknowledged her challenge and engaged her in a fight. They clashed for a bit, and when Elka was satisfied, she backed down, saying that Yuhi had grown much stronger than she realized. However, she told her that there was still something she lacked that would hinder her from standing beside Setsu like she dreamed. She then took Yuhi to a sewer infested with monsters and explained that it was often used as a final training ground for soldiers. The next moment, a large crocodile monster came out of the water, startling Yuhi, but Elka reminded her to pull herself together. Yuhi managed to approach the creature even though her fear of it never left, and thanks to Elka's encouraging words, she stood her ground. After firing off a fireball which lit up the creature, she excitedly turned to Elka, expecting praises, but the knight told her not to let her guard down. When she turned back around, she saw that the monster had risen to its full height and was about to attack her. To save herself, she wedged her staff in its mouth, but still got scratched by its claws. Elka then instructed her to attack, so she fired another fireball at it, and this time it went flying. However, it didn't die. Elka instructed her to finish it off, but she hesitated, so the knight stepped up. She said it didn't matter how much Yuhi had grown, because if she wasn't willing to take a life on the battlefield, she didn't belong there. Her words made Yuhi remember the battle that took place the day they arrived, and as she watched on, Elka used her ice magic to kill the monster before leaving. Yuhi crumbled to the floor after this, as she had realized everything Elka told her was the truth. The very next morning, Thea dropped by Yuhi's room to heal the wound the monster left on her arm. After she finished, Yuhi thanked her, and the girl said it was crazy of Elka to throw her into a real battle so soon. Yuhi defended Elka, claiming it was her fault because she'd asked Elka to give her special training. Thea noticed she looked sad, so she told her that she, Elka, and Glein saw her as one of their own because Setsu looked at her the same way he looked at them. She said Elka was only hard on her because she wanted to treat her as an equal and help her get to their level. Seeing the surprise on Yuhi's face, Thea asked why she was determined to cling to Setsu like an obsessed girlfriend. Yuhi said it was because Setsu had helped her all her life, so she wanted to become someone he could rely on. Satisfied with her answer, Thea wished her luck, and as she left the room, she told Elka, who was standing outside the door, that Yuhi was stronger than she gave her credit for. Elka didn't dispute that fact, but said that she was worried she wouldn't be able to handle the dangerous foes she would encounter when the time came for her to stand with them and fight. Thea told her that it was up to Yuhi to decide if she wanted to take that step or not, and advised her to trust that she would make the right choice. That evening, as Glein was heading somewhere, he spotted Yuhi standing in the corner of the training ground, so he went to speak to her. He said he was aware of what happened in the sewers and told her it was natural to be hesitant about taking lives. Yuhi asked how he'd managed to overcome his hesitation, and he told her that he simply steeled his resolve to protect those he cared about. He said he'd rather see his enemies suffer than stand by and watch his people suffer. When Yuhi turned to look at him, he told her that what worked for him might not work for her, so she had to find her own determination and make it work. His parting words to her were that Setsu would probably want the same thing for her, and that got Yuhi thinking. As she wondered what she could do to ensure that she stayed true to herself while fighting, an answer suddenly came to her mind. The next day, during training, she unleashed a powerful fire spell, shocking everyone who witnessed it. After training, she returned to the sewers with Elka, who told her that forcing herself out of her comfort zone during battle might break her. Yuhi simply replied that she wanted her to stay and watch her determination, and when another monster emerged from the water, she didn't hesitate to light it up. Elka was impressed by what she'd witnessed, but Yuhi made it clear that she had incapacitated the monster instead of slaying it. She explained that she still wasn't interested in taking lives, but said she would ensure that when she got on the battlefield, she wouldn't lose to her opponent. Elka smiled and said that was the same thing Setsu would say, but reminded her that she needed an astounding amount of power to pull off what she intended to do. So Yuhi assured her that she would get stronger to protect everyone she cared about. Days later, Glein gathered the students in the throne room and informed them that, in accordance with the king's decree, they would be leaving for the demon continent the next day. He advised them to prepare themselves both physically and mentally and then dismiss them. As the students dispersed, they talked amongst themselves, asking if they were truly prepared to go to war. However, Yuhi didn't join them. Instead, she went back and joined Setsu's friends where they were standing. Elsewhere, as Setsu and Levia were in a carriage heading for the Beastmen nation, Setsu asked why she hadn't just used transfer magic to get them to their destination. Levia answered that that kind of magic was a hassle because it required years of preparation and a lot of magic power. The next moment, the carriage came to a sudden stop, and 2 female demons got in the back with them. Setsu immediately recognized the older one and called her crybaby Elise, causing her to get all emotional and start crying even though she swore she was no longer a crybaby. As the carriage continued on its way, Setsu introduced Elise to Levia, explaining that they had traveled together for a while the last time he was summoned. Elise added that she was Setsu's top student, but he denied it and said he had no recollection of ever taking her under his wing. Elise told him to stop capping and reminded him that he'd physically taught her the fundamentals of combat every night the whole time they were traveling. The way she said it prompted Levia to ask if the physical training burned any calories. Setsu tried defending himself, but the other demon girl spoke up, drawing attention to herself, so Levia asked who she was. Elise introduced her as just Emil, but Emil added that she was Elise's little sister because they lived together. Changing the topic, Elise asked Setsu why he went AWOL for 5 years, so Setsu gave her a summary of what happened. Elise said if it were anyone else who told her the story, she wouldn't believe them, but since it was Setsu, she believed it. Setsu then invited her to come with him and Levia to the Beastmen continent, but she declined, saying she had an issue to resolve. Emil claimed responsibility for the issue, so Elise was forced to give them the gist of what went down. She said she'd taken on monster-slaying jobs as part of her training, and one of her gigs was to slay a dragon for a village. When she arrived at the village, the villagers set her up in a house with Emil, and while they were having dinner, she asked Emil if she lived alone. Emil answered that she used to share the house with her older adoptive brother, who found her 2 years prior and welcomed her into his home. However, since the day the dragon started showing up, she hadn't seen him. Elise felt sorry for her, but Emil told her not to, as she was used to being alone. Despite this, Elise said she would love to remain in the village for a while after her business was finished, and Emil told her she could stay with her for as long as she wished. Back in the present, Setsu asked if Emil's brother had been devoured by the dragon, and Elise answered that it was more complicated than that. She explained that each time the dragon appeared, people went missing. However, there were never any signs of struggle whenever this happened, so she deduced that something was off. To get to the bottom of it, she took a risk and disabled the wards around the village to lure the dragon in and finish it off once and for all. This hadn't worked so well because when she fought and injured the dragon, it ran away. She immediately gave chase, hoping to land a final blow, but the dragon suddenly disappeared. And when she returned to the village, everyone except Emil was gone, so she took her with her. With her story concluded, Elise asked Setsu what he thought about the situation, and Setsu admitted it was the first time he had heard of a kidnapping dragon. However, he said he was intrigued and offered to help her get to the bottom of the mystery. Levia told them to count her in, so Emil thanked them, but made the mistake of referring to Levia as Setsu's wife, causing the god to almost choke. As the journey progressed, Levia theorized about the dragon's origin and what it did with the villagers. All her theories turned out to be as dumb and stupid as her, and Setsu didn't fail to let her know that he thought so. She went from claiming they had been turned into invisible zombies to saying they were lured to the sea by the dragon, who was actually a siren. Setsu happily dismissed all her theories as pointless, but dared to say that the villagers had been abducted by aliens. The girls had never heard of aliens before, so Setsu told them that aliens were creatures who came from the moon to kidnap humans. The next moment, Levia smacked the delusional idiot on the head and told him to focus. Taking her advice, he speculated that the dragon was an advanced species like Levia, but the god told him not to compare her to a flying lizard. Suddenly, their carriage stopped, and the driver explained that because of the rain, the river's water level had risen, so they had to wait until the water settled to cross. Out of curiosity, Setsu asked what could have possibly attracted the dragon to the village in the first place, and Levia deduced it was magic. She explained that monsters were attracted to powerful magic, and if someone in the village had repeatedly been casting powerful magic inside the village, it would make sense that the dragon would keep showing up. This response led Setsu to theorize that the villagers hadn't been kidnapped, but rather teleported to another place using magic, which was why there were never signs of a struggle. He then shocked Elise by accusing Emil of being the one behind the villagers' mysterious disappearance. Elise didn't believe him, so he told her what Levia had said about transfer magic, requiring years of preparation. Coincidentally, Emil had moved to the village 2 years ago, so it was safe to say that she'd had a lot of time to practice. Emil denied his allegations, and Alice backed her up, saying she was also a victim of what happened. But Setsu didn't take back his words. He presented undisputable facts, and when Emil saw that she'd been caught, she stopped pretending and transformed into a dragon. When she started attacking, Sadis and Levia fought back, but Elise was too dazed to lift a finger. It wasn't until Setsu called out to her and told her to get her head back in the game that she got up and charged at the dragon. Together with Setsu and Levia, she managed to slay the dragon once and for all. Later on, after Setsu and Levia had parted ways with Elise, she returned to Emil's house in the village. While searching around for clues, Emil showed up with some monsters, and revealed that she'd turned the villagers into magic dolls because they needed magic soldiers for the war. She then reintroduced herself using her real name and title, Meluar, the Monster Master. Days later, in a town on the Beastmen continent, Shironeko, a young beast girl who was on her way home, was given freebies by the townspeople as a way of thanking her for helping them. When she arrived home, she was welcomed by Mineko, her younger sister, who was very ill. Just then, Mineko suddenly started coughing, so Shironeko rushed to get her some medicine. After taking it, Mineko apologized, but Shironeko hugged her tightly and promised to find a permanent cure for her. The following day, Setsu and Levia attempted to get a boat to take them to the Beastman capital, but the boatman told them to go away as no boats were available. Instead of doing that, Setsu offered to pay the man double if he let him ride on his back, and the man became extra mad. He told Setsu to F off, so the entitled idiot turned to Levia and told her to get in the water, which caused her to lash out and scold him for being the epitome of self-centeredness. Realizing his mistake, Setsu apologized and patted Levia's head, telling her that he only said that because she was the only one he could rely on for things like that. This unintentional rizzing caused the sea god to fold, so she said that she would carry him to the capital the next day. Just then, the boatman informed them that a boat would be available the next day, and Setsu happily thanked him. Annoyed that the man had failed to read the room, Levia got mad and started complaining again, so Setsu suggested that they go find some food and an inn to stay for the night. Meanwhile, Shironeko visited a store in another part of town to get Mineko's medicine, and after giving it to her, Kuroinu, the storekeeper, informed her that she had another job for her. She then handed her a flyer with Setsu's picture and said that once she completed the job, she would receive a hefty sum and never have to worry about buying medicine for her sister. Just then, Setsu and Levia walked into the place, so Shironeko quickly moved behind Kuroinu and covered her face with her hood. As Kuroinu began attending to Setsu and Levia, who were there looking for a room, Shironeko calmly walked out but ensured that she got a good look at Setsu. Later at night, after she had dinner with her sister, she told her that she had a job she needed to complete and asked her to go to bed without her. Hours later, she arrived at the inn and was met by Kuroinu, who informed her that Setsu and Levia were fast asleep and provided her with their room key. When she got into the room, she found them fast asleep like Kuroinu had said, so she extended her claws and attacked Setsu first. To her surprise, what she cut up was the mattress, and that's when she realized that they had cast an illusion spell. The next moment, she got kicked out of the window by Setsu, who suddenly appeared behind her. Being a cat and all, Shironeko landed on her feet. So Setis jumped after her and asked if she was one of Toma's minions. Shironeko answered that she'd never heard that name before, and said all she knew was that she had to smoke him. She then did a partial beast transformation and unleashed a large fireball, but Setsu cut it in half. When she attempted to flee, Setsu grabbed her by the head and scolded her for using fire in a residential area, after which he slapped her into a stall where she passed out. When Setsu and Levia went to check on her, they noticed that her body was glowing, and Setsu confirmed to Levia that it was because of a curse. Later on, when Shironeko regained consciousness, she realized she was back home, and was surprised to see Setsu and Levia there. She immediately tried to attack Setsu again, but Mineko stopped her, saying it was Setsu and Levia who brought her home, after they found her passed out on the street. The obvious lie had Shironeko turning to look at Setsu, but he signaled for her to keep quiet, and then asked if she took on dangerous jobs because her sister was sick. Shironeko didn't respond, so Setsu took that as a confirmation and revealed that Mineko wasn't sick. To prove it, he approached Mineko and used light magic on her necklace, causing it to release some of the dark magic inside it. When he began explaining to the surprised sisters that it was a powerful curse, Levia tried to ask if it was Toma's doing, but Setsu cut her off. He said what was most important was saving Mineko. Hearing this, Shironeko pleaded with them to save Mineko, and Setsu promised that he would do so. Turning his attention to Mineko, he instructed her to lie down and then summoned a sword named Gluttony, which he ordered to eat up the curse. While the sword was feasting on the curse, Levia sensed something, and the next moment, a kunai came flying towards Setsu. Immediately, Shironeko moved to shield him, and after she got hit in the shoulder, the culprit was revealed to be Kuroinu. She expressed disappointment at Shironeko's failure to complete her job, as well as the fact that she was now trying to protect her target. Setsu became conflicted because he couldn't leave Mineko and fight Kuroinu, who had declared that she'd come to take him into custody. Just then, Levia, who was annoyed that she was being ignored, blasted Kuroinu with water. Setsu asked if she needed any backup because he could sense how powerful Kuroinu was, and she told him not to underestimate her. She then attacked Kuroinu, who attempted to cheat her way to victory by using cloning jutsu. However, Levia wasn't the least bit phased. She took out the clones using water, after which she gave the same treatment to the real one. As Kuroinu tried to get back up, Levia demanded to know what Toma's endgame was. She promised to spare Kuroinu's life if she answered honestly, but the proud woman told her that begging didn't fit her aesthetics. At that moment, Shironeko joined them outside, and when she tried to talk to Kuroinu, she angrily threw insults at her. Tired of listening to her yap, Levia stepped in front of Shironeko and told Kuroinu to shut up, but she just laughed before revealing that Toma's goal was to become a god and destroy all the pieces in that world. This made Levia say that Toma was more delusional than a risless simp, but Kuroinu assured her that Toma could achieve anything, and then broke a jewel, which enveloped her in a bright light. When the light disappeared, they found that Kuroinu was gone. Just then, Mineko came running towards them from the house, and as the sisters embraced, Setsu confirmed to Levia that Mineko's necklace was the same as the one in Terran's possession. Levia told him what Toma was planning, and Seda said he would do well to ensure that it never happened. The following day, the Cat Sisters begged Setsu and Levia to take them along with them on their journey, and they agreed. Later that day, in the Beastmen capital, the king and his generals met to discuss the war, and the generals were at each other's throats because everyone had different opinions. Regulus didn't even try to intervene, but he suddenly picked up on something and signaled his daughter Roa, who excitedly rushed out. It turned out that Setsu had just arrived and was trying to convince the guards to let him and the girls into the palace, but they kept refusing. After the Cat Sisters tried their luck and failed, Setsu decided he was going to break in, but before he could do it, Roa came falling from above, calling out his name. The guards were the unfortunate ones who cushioned her fall, but she didn't care as she hugged Setsu. The next moment, she extended her claws, but before she could do anything, Setsu had her pinned to the ground. Roa expressed joy at getting manhandled like that, and said she hadn't expected anything less from her future master, but Setsu told her he didn't do furries. As they began bickering like an old couple, Shironeko and Mineko watched them in awe, wondering if that was truly their princess. On their way to the throne room, Roa attached herself to Setsu's arm, and things started getting a bit touchy-feely, so Mineko told them to save it for the bedroom. Just then, the throne room door burst open, and a very excited Regulus exclaimed that he'd missed Setsu. In response, Setsu flipped the king over and slammed him to the floor, yet he didn't mind and laughed it off, surprising the Cat Sisters. Looking inside the throne room, Setsu saw that all the generals had been beaten into unconsciousness and commented that some things never changed. After they went in, Regulus declared that there would be a feast to celebrate Setsu's return, but Setsu told him to slow his roll and explained that his reason for coming to him was very serious. Regulus figured it was because of the war, and when Setsu revealed to him that it was Toma's doing and that Toma wanted to destroy their world, he insisted on joining him on the battlefield. Setsu refused and told him that it would be better if he remained in the Beastmen kingdom because he was sure that Toma would try to stir up trouble there. Roa then volunteered to go to her father's place, but the stubborn king tried to argue that he was the best option until Ruga interrupted him. Ruga and he told the king that, aside from the fact that demons and humans were their enemies, they too were at risk of an invasion, so they couldn't spare people to help Setsu. Curious, Setsu asked Regulus who the loudmouth was, but before he could respond, Ruga proudly introduced himself as the commander of the Zu Dorado army and Roa's fiancé. However, Roa shook her head in denial after he said this. Regulus agreed that it would be unwise to send out their troops, but he said he couldn't turn down his friend's request. Upon hearing that Setsu was the famous hero, he asked if they could really trust someone who had ghosted an entire world for 5 years. Road jumped into the conversation at that moment, defending Setsu's credibility, but Ruga argued that going back to an ex wasn't always a smart choice. Seeing as both sides had valid points, Regulus suggested they settle things the way Beastmen usually did, so Ruga challenged Setsu to a duel. Regulus then announced that he would officiate the match and added that whoever emerged the victor would have Roa's hand in marriage. Setsu immediately tried to set the record straight that he hadn't come there for Roa, but Ruga cut him off and said he'd wait for him in the arena at noon the next day. At night, Roa visited Ruga and straight up told him that he didn't stand a chance against Setsu, and surprisingly, Ruga agreed. However, he said that as a Beastman warrior and a man, there were things he couldn't back down from, and the duel against Setsu was one of them. He also said that he believed he could win because of the magic rune that had been tattooed on his arm by an Eastern mage. The rune was said to convert strong will into strength, and he didn't care if relying on it made him seem weak because he was willing to do everything to protect Roa, including laying down his life. The next day at noon, the arena was filled with excited Beastmen who had come to watch the duel, and Roa told Setsu that Beastmen were hardcore adrenaline junkies. After the fight began, Ruga used a skill called Flying Claw, but Setsu easily returned it to him and told Ruga to give him a real challenge. Annoyed, Ruga wove out and attacked Setsu again, but he was still no match for Setsu, and when Setsu was tired of playing with him, he told Ruga to tap out and give up Roa. This amped up Ruga's anger and annoyance, causing his rune to glow and forcing him to go berserk. Setsu and Levia immediately recognized that he was under one of Toma's curses, and Regulus instructed everyone in the arena to clear out. Ruga's mind was so clouded that all he wanted to do was end Setsu, so he charged at him without a second thought and attacked. Levia tossed Setsu's sword at him, and he used it to cut off Ruga's arm, which regenerated. Just then, Roa rushed into the place and tried, but Setsu stopped her, instructing her not to get closer to Ruga because the curse could be transmitted. Still, Roa begged him to let her tap in, saying that she had to take Ruga down as a proud Beastman warrior, so Setsu agreed. When he attempted to summon Gluttony, the entire arena became foggy, and the next moment, Ruga's head disintegrated and was replaced with an illusion of Toma. He then told Setsu that he had missed him and began giving him a whole speech about how he wanted to wipe out the entire world so they could be alone. Roa cut him off mid-speech to ask what he'd done to Ruga, so he got annoyed and tried to get rid of her, but Setsu intervened. Displeased, Toma decided to drop a bomb and informed Setsu that Dystinia had begun invading the demonic continent. He said that by the time he returned it would be too late, and all his favorite people would be dead. After saying all that, Toma's image vanished, and Ruga's headless body fell to the ground as the skies opened up. Later on in the throne room, Setsu and Regulus talked about what Toma said, and Regulus promised to provide him with a ship and military personnel. After leaving Regulus, Setsu returned to the arena to find Roa because she refused to leave the place. He asked how she was holding up, and she answered that it wasn't the time for her to get all sentimental because they had an important task to take care of. Meanwhile, the ships carrying Dystinia's army were about to make land on the shores of the demonic continent, so the general decided to give them the classic Erwin speech. The soldiers cheered after listening to him, but the students remained quiet as they were unsure that they would return alive. Yuhi, Elka, Glein, and Thea were also quiet, but for different reasons. Using her magic ball, Thea sensed that Toma was on the island, confirming to them that he was the true enemy they had to fight. Unfortunately, they couldn't tell this to the general because he wouldn't believe them and might even accuse them of being spies. The situation made Yuhi think of Setsu, and then she told the others that wherever he was doing his best to stop the war. It was then decided that they would work together to minimize the casualties and also buy time until Setsu arrived to end everything. Soon, they made landfall, and the battle began in full, with each side opening and returning fire with powerful magic. After the humans broke through the demons' defenses, Glein signaled for students to follow him and charged in, but Thea and Elka held them back to advise them. After the girls charged into the battle, the students still hesitated. But when they realized that standing around made them easy targets, they decided to join the battle. One of the girls was still paralyzed by fear, and just as she was about to be attacked by a demon warrior, Yuhi saved her using fire magic. She then rushed to check on the girl, and while giving her a pep talk, she noticed that some of her classmates were about to finish off an injured demon, so she called out to them to stop. The boy holding the spear asked why she'd stopped him, and said that if the roles were reversed, the demon would finish him off. Yuhi shot back, asking if he truly believed it was morally right to attack a person who could defend themselves. The next moment, they heard Meluar laugh, and after she commended Yuhi's noble act, she activated magic circles around the battlefield and began dropping magic soldiers like nuclear bombs. After the drop-off, a puppeteered Alice came up from the ground through a magic circle like she was about to perform at a K-pop concert. The human soldiers closest to her demanded to know who she was, but she ignored them and sliced them nicely with her blade. Seeing this, the demon soldiers assumed Elise and the magic soldiers were reinforcements, but received the shock of their lives when the magic soldiers began attacking them. When Glein cut down some of the magic soldiers, he and the girls realized that they were made from humans and became repulsed. As they tried to figure out their next step, they heard Meluar humming and looked up to find her standing beside Elise, whom they had finally recognized. Elka angrily demanded to know what Meluar had done to their friend, and she answered that she turned her into a doll because she was strong. She then asked if they would like to become puppets as well, saying that way they could be together forever. Annoyed, Elka moved to cut Meluar down, but she controlled Elise to protect her, and as both girls crossed swords, Elka tried to talk Alice back to her senses, but it didn't work. Meluar then slit her wrist and used her blood to create magic monsters, which she set upon Thea and Glein. However, the snake monster went after Elka while she was fighting Elise, so the knight jumped out of the way and slayed it with ice magic. Glein slashed the ape monster with his sword, while Thea unleashed a series of magic spells. When they regrouped, Elka told them that she would hand Meluar and ask them to take out the remaining monster, but Yuhi showed up just then and took it down. They then turned to Meluar and asked what she would do now that her toys were gone, and the girl became pissed. She ordered Elise to finish them off, but Glein took her on this time and knocked her out. Seeing this, Meluar decided it was time to make herself scarce, but before she could move, Elka rushed her and stabbed her magic organ. Despite this, Meluar didn't die, and when Elka questioned why that was, she revealed that her body had been modified, so she had an extra heart, lungs, and a magic organ. As they stared at her in disbelief, Meluar further revealed that they had been created as weapons and were put through painful experiments every day until Toma showed up and saved them. After her revelation, she activated a spell called Limit Break, which allowed its user to surpass all their limitations. What emerged from her magic circle was a three-headed chimera, and as they watched on, Meluar jumped on it and merged herself with it. Thea told her friends that what Meluar was doing was very dangerous, because she had lost all sense of reasoning and was now fueling her magic power using her life force and the deep-rooted hatred she felt. When she attacked, they jumped out of the way, but Meluar wasn't about to give up and showed them what her new toy could do by attacking them with its flaming breath. Thea and Yuhi quickly protected the group using magic shields, but this drained Thea's power and she fell, leaving her friends worried. Glein then asked Elka what they should do, and she answered that she had no idea, but the next moment, she noticed a butterfly moving towards Meluar. Meluar also noticed the insect but thought nothing of it, and was about to unleash another attack when she was suddenly stabbed from behind by Elise. As the life drained from Meluar, Elise recalled all the moments they spent together, and hugged her tightly until her body turned to stone. Following this, Elise was attended to, and Glein assured Elka that the healing magic was working on her. Thea and Yuhi stood staring at Meluar's Chimera statue, and Thea admitted that she hadn't expected Meluar to be so strong. She also said they needed a breather before jumping back into the battle, but suddenly sensed an unsettling presence. The next moment, a shadow arm rose out of the water, and Kaguru, the shadow user Setsu fought at Dazostal's wedding, appeared before them. Yuhi volunteered to go fight him, causing her friends to voice their disagreements, but she argued that if Setsu were in her position, he'd do the same thing. Seeing her determination, they agreed to let her fight, and Thea offered to support her, but before they could engage Kaguru, Setsu made a dramatic entrance. Turning to his friends, he told them to rest easy because Daddy was home, and while the rest simply welcomed him, an overexcited Yuhi tackled him to the ground. Setsu had to remind her that they were in public before she composed herself, and apologized after getting off him. Not surprisingly, Setsu wasn't offended, and even apologized for returning late, but Yuhi said it was okay as she understood the situation. She then told him she'd been training with Elka, and before Setsu could stop her, she got on all fours and told him to have a seat. This earned her a flick on the forehead, as Setsu told her that one masochistic freak was more than enough for him to hang out with. After she composed herself, he instructed her to go and stand back with the others, saying he would handle Kaguru, so she wished him luck. When he approached him, Kaguru said he'd been dying to fight him again, and told Setsu that he wasn't the same guy he'd fought at the wedding. When he powered up, Setsu took an attacking stance, but quickly glanced at his friends who were all standing behind the protective shield Yuhi set up. This made Kaguru ask why he was worried about a bunch of weak insects, and Setsu proudly told him that those so-called insects were his friends whom he'd do anything to protect. His reason was lost on Kaguru, who still believed that all weak things deserved to die, so Setsu attacked him. Meanwhile, Kuroinu was having a field day, slashing, citing, and tearing up all those who stood in her way until the Cat Sisters arrived. Mineko tried to appeal to her good side, but Kuroinu laughed and told Mineko to stop talking. She then threw her kunai at them, but the sisters deflected them, so she promised that she'd destroy their so-called sisterhood. When she attacked, the girls fought back and began tag-teaming her until things started looking like a classic Monday Night Raw match, because Mineko kneed her into the ground. After she passed out, the sisters assumed everything was over until Mineko was scooped up by some tentacles, which began squeezing her like she was an old tube of toothpaste. These tentacles were attached to one of the 4 extra arms that Kuroinu had sprouted after she regained consciousness, and she told them she would make them pay for their insolence. The next moment, she activated her limit break and knocked Shironeko down, before telling them that sisterhood was a curse. Shironeko replied that Kuroinu was the only one who thought that way, which pissed her off, so she went all out with her next attack, but it was futile. Shironeko managed to dodge all of them, and then leapt in the air to grab her sister's outstretched hands. The moment their hands touched, they merged into one and broke free of the tentacles which had been wrapped around Mineko. Still, Kuroinu mocked them, saying their rip-off Gotenks transformation wasn't enough to stop her, but they shut her up in a second by zooming past her. Terrified, Kurino grew more arms and tried to attack them again, but they began spinning like a mini-tornado and cut off most of her arms. As a result, Kuroinu lost her balance and fell to the ground, but she stubbornly refused to give up, saying she couldn't face her people if she did. Flashes of 2 other girls came into her mind, but once she remembered they were dead, she lashed out again and lunged at the sisters, so they punched her in the stomach. This time, when she fell, she didn't get back up, and after the girls separated, she weakly told them that seeing how close they were disgusted her. This prompted Shironeko to ask if she used to have sisters, and she replied that she didn't know before using her hands to cover herself as she passed out. At that same time, the 4th member of the murder squad broke into the demon army's encampment and was immediately attacked. However, their blades didn't harm him, so after he sent them flying, he uncloaked himself to reveal that he belonged in the JoJo universe. He also proudly announced that his name was Virdos and invited them to try their best and defeat him. His appearance and attire left the soldiers completely stunned, and they completely forgot that they were supposed to be fighting him. Just then, Roa came flying out of nowhere and punched the guy, but she regretted her actions almost immediately as Virdos' body was harder than a diamond. She then ordered the soldiers to retreat, promising to deal with their unwanted guests, so they did. When Verdos got back up, he told Roa that her punch had felt like a pat, so she pointed out that it was because he didn't have regular muscles. Verdos admitted he was made of iron and said that humans were the ones who made him that way. He then went on to explain how Toma had saved him, but hearing Toma's name pissed Roa off, and she told him to stop hyping up the madman. Verdos replied that she was being testy for no reason because by the time they were done, everyone would be dead, just like Ruga. Enraged, Roa ran and kicked him, hurting herself in the process, but she refused to give up, and as she powered up, she told him she would keep hitting him until he broke. Verdos said that she couldn't hurt him, and then dissolved into tiny molecules, which then turned into iron pellets. The next moment, the pellets began hitting Roa from all sides, and didn't stop until she coughed up blood and fell. After returning to his original form, Verdos started walking away since he believed Roa was dead, but she got up and attacked him after charging up. She kept throwing punch after punch, and to his surprise, she managed to cause damage. So to defend himself, he impaled her with spikes that formed from his body. However, Roa surprised him by breaking them and then punching him in the stomach before she fell. Seeing her like that, Verdos called her a fool, but used his powers to heal her, and when she regained consciousness, she asked why he'd done it. He tried to explain, but he was too weak and fell, so she asked why he worked for Toma, and he answered that it was because he was his type. Meanwhile, the fight between Setsu and Kaguru continued, and when Kaguru realized that he couldn't defeat Setsu, he activated his limit break. Now covered in body armor, he charged at Setsu again, and as they fought, the armor absorbed all Setsu's attacks. He then punched Setsu to the ground, but Setsu got back up, and after he channeled his energy into his sword, he used it to strike Kaguru, breaking his armor and sword. Still, Kaguru refused to accept defeat and charged at Setsu again, but Setsu finished him off once and for all. Almost immediately, Toma, who was heading to Desastol's castle, sensed it, but even the realization that all his allies had been defeated didn't deter him from his mission. He released some of his aura, letting it flow upwards like a flare signal for Setsu to see and follow. Inside the castle, Levia rushed to find Desastol and was relieved when she found her standing inside her office. Desastol then told her that the 3 powerful magic forces she'd sensed on the battlefield had vanished, which meant that the tides were finally turning in their favor. However, Toma showed up at that moment and said they were silly for thinking that anything would change because his allies had been defeated. He revealed that as long as he was alive, the war would go on, and then began charging up his energy. By the time Setsu arrived, he'd already injured the girls, but thankfully not to the point of death. Seeing Setsu, Toma greeted him warmly but admitted that he was jealous to see how he came running to save them. He then said it didn't matter because he was going to unalive them eventually, so Setsu got pissed and attacked him. Toma blocked the attack with his sword, and Setsu used the opportunity to tell him that he wouldn't let him hurt his friends. Toma had expected that response, so he jumped back and told Setsu that very soon it would just be the 2 of them, and he could use that time to lay down his complaints. Setsu charged at him again, but Toma dodged before matching his strike. They continued that way until Toma decided to cheat and fired a lightning bolt at Setsu, which he batted away like a baseball. The bolt struck the ceiling, destroying it as it went on to crack the sky open like an egg. Desastol used a magic shield to protect herself and Levia from getting hit by the falling rubble. And as she expressed shock at what she'd just witnessed, Levia commented that the guys were on a different level. As the fight continued, Toma attacked Setsu with Energy Blast, and when he wasn't paying attention, he snuck up on him from behind and hit him at a closer range, making it impossible for Setsu to dodge or defend himself. Toma teased Setsu, saying he'd grown weak, but Setsu refused to let him talk smack about him and get away with it. So when they charged at each other again, he ensured that he disarmed Toma. After which, he dropped his own sword and began using Toma as a punching bag, refusing to stop until Toma activated a spell, which almost exploded in his face. This put some distance between them, so Toma reclaimed his sword and transformed it into a big gun. To flex on Setsu, he opened fire, and to everyone's horror, the blast destroyed what was left of the ceiling, and even put a hole in the mountain that was in the line of fire. Right there and then, Setsu resolved to stop Toma at all costs before he used his deadly weapon to harm innocent people. He charged at Toma, kicking him out of the castle, and as they floated in the air, Toma tried to land a hit on him but was unable to. Because of that, he transformed the gun into a machine gun and opened fire on Setsu, who had to summon Gluttony to devour the attacks. Toma was left momentarily stunned, so Setsu took the chance to go Super Saiyan, and once his swords were fully charged, he sent energy strikes to Toma. Despite getting hit by so much energy, Toma remained unharmed and complained that Setsu's sword was a thorn in his side. Setsu replied that he was just hating because his sword was cooler than his, and as they had a stare-off, Setsu's friends showed up. Roa called out to him, so he turned to face them and said he was glad to see that they were all safe. But this angered Toma. Not because they were alive, but because he was suddenly reminded of the past, where Setsu seemed happy and content hanging out with them. Overcome with rage, his powers began spiking, and he told Setsu that he was always leaving him alone to hang out with his friends. As Setsu observed him, he finally realized that the energy wasn't coming from Toma, and recalled that it was the same energy he used on the night they first clashed. The next moment, there was a bright light, and when it disappeared, Toma's weapon had evolved, and he had a large magic circle behind him. Seeing this, Setsu figured that he'd activated Limit Break. When Toma finally opened fire on Setsu, the hero dodged all the shots, so Toma became annoyed and turned the weapon on his friends. Setsu had to activate Gluttony again to absorb the attack, but he couldn't get everything and became worried that his friends would get hurt. Fortunately, they protected themselves using magic shields, so Setsu refocused his attention on Toma, sending slash after slash towards him until his weapon broke. He then sent a final one, which hit Toma, and as Toma began falling, his life with Setsu flashed in his mind, and he got even angrier. The next moment, a larger weapon materialized beside him, and he used it on Setsu without hesitation, knocking him down in the process. Just as Toma began thinking he'd won, Setsu got back up and activated Domain Expansion, making it impossible for Toma to use his weapons. He then stabbed the ground, and as the stones moved underneath Toma, he became afraid and started pleading with Setsu, reminding him that he'd promised to always protect him. However, Setsu didn't lift a finger to help him, and when everything was over, Toma realized that he was still alive. Confused, he asked Setsu why he'd spared him, and Setsu repeated what he said about his promise to protect him. He also explained that he'd done what he did so he could use Gluttony to devour the curse that was controlling him, and bring him back to normal. Overcome with guilt, Toma said he didn't deserve to live, but Setsu told him that he now had all the time to atone for his many sins. Days later, Setsu, Desistol, and Regulus visited Toma in his prison cell, and told him that it had been decided that his punishment would be to send Setsu's classmates back home. This sounded like a joke to Toma, but Setsu explained that doing so would exhaust whatever power he had left, making him a normal human again. He also suggested that Toma go with them and start over in their world, and Desistol let him understand that the only reason they were letting him go was because Setsu had pleaded his case. Later on, Toma sent the students back, but didn't go with them, so Setsu met him in the evening to ask why. He told him it was because he wanted to atone for his sins by traveling around the world he once tried to destroy to see how he could help fix it. Understanding where he was coming from, Setsu wished him good luck, and they parted ways. A few days later, Setsu said goodbye to his friends as he was setting off on another journey, but Elka got all emotional and begged him to take her with him. Yuhai soon joined them, and after Setsu confirmed her readiness to travel with him, the two left to explore the world together. Do you think Setsu and Yuhi would finally get together, or would Setsu keep playing the fool? If you got this far and loved this video, let us know by commenting simp. Also, why don't you check out the next video? See you next time.